Ridiculous, isn't it? Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Garden Shed. I'm on my own tonight. Laurence's wife is her birthday, so Laurence is unavailable, and Benedict is really overladen with his company work. So basically, I'm supposed to give a talk tonight and post it online, and basically will be discussed this Friday. No going down the pub this week, sadly. But how's your weekend been? Mine, I got to see my son. Yep, well, my elder son. Uh, First time in 4 months. It was really tear-inducing, to be honest. But within seconds, it was like he'd never been gone. He only lives a couple of miles away, and constantly on the phone and everything else. But it was like not seeing your parents. I mean, my mother snuck in a couple of weeks ago because she went to the first opening of Mass, first opening of the church, that is. And, we all had to keep sort of 10 foot away. And it was, it's not right. We're not doing right. We're not doing, when, so many people have died when it comes to coronavirus, but then again, so many people die of flu every year. And my big bugbear is, of course, that over 130,000 every year in our hospitals are starved and dehydrated to death because they're no longer wanted. It began as the Liverpool care pathway, which was seen as such a way of palliative care and easing someone towards the end of their life. And it's a lie that basically we're the most agonizing death possible is to die from dehydration, because I don't think people want to know this, but basically opiates don't work. And so all the painkillers you've been given, and you are pumped more and more with painkillers, they don't actually work because there's no water to actually circulate around your body and to actually disseminate the analgesia. And as well as that, because your breath becomes really hard and becomes, you start to fill with edema fluid and it becomes more viscous. What they do is they actually give you a sedative called midazolam, and they also they also inject a thing called hyoscine, which even desiccates you further, but it stops your chest from rattling. And basically your organs necrotize and they turn black and they start to dissolve into your blood system. And what happens in your muscles is there's a thing called a myoclonic spasm, whereby your muscles form salt bridges and you get electric shocks across them. And it's excruciating. And yet we do that to 130,000 people in this country. 1 in 6 of our people who die are put on this care pathway. And it's diabolical. And nobody seems to be outraged about that. And we have other things. I mean, it's just... And the things that came along with COVID. I mean, I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I worry. And I worry about the government interventions and craziness and to everything else. It's an aside. Anyway, why did I go off topic? Yeah, welcome. If you like what we say, please subscribe and, you know, tap the little bell so you get notified when our videos come up. I'll begin with the prayer. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Sacred Heart of Jesus, have mercy on us. Precious blood of Jesus, have mercy on us. Most holy name of Jesus, have mercy on us. Immaculate Heart of Mary, pray for us. Seat of wisdom, pray for us. Our Lady of Sorrows, pray for us. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So, what have you all been up to? As I said, my son came around and we played a board game. I'll show you. Fury of Dracula. It's a fantastic game. We have one person plays Dracula, and he is secretly moving throughout Europe, laying traps as he passes through. And you have 4 vampire hunters from the book, and they all have to chase Dracula, going from city to city, looking to see, has he been there, has he done this? And eventually trapping Dracula and fighting him. It is an excellent game. It really is. It's been updated, 4 times? And so I used to have a version in the 1980s. I took it to seminary, and it was all little cardboard squares and everything else, but still immense fun. Yeah, board games are quite a bit of my life, because although I'm a student and myself and my family don't get much time to play, but when we do, it is so much fun. Seriously, if you want to bring your family together, get board games. I mean, I have board games up there, board games up there, board games over there, board games in the cupboard there, board games in the cupboard over there. So, and I don't buy full price, and I get them for birthday presents and things like that, because I haven't got any money on this. But, anything that's reduced to under a tenner from 70, 80 quid, I will buy, because it's good fun. As well as that, I've done a lot of reading. I watched a lot of YouTube videos. One thing that's really sort of come up in my head recently has been, especially with this cancel culture, that most of it is based on ideologies, and virtually every ideology can be grounded in someone seeing a problem and then thinking, well, what caused the problem? And invariably getting the actual problem wrong. And, if you actually read any critical thinking books and logic books, and incidentally, brilliant logic book. If you ever want to learn logic, Peter Kreeft's Socratic Logic is absolutely gold dust. Highly recommend it. Yeah, it's basically, I recommend that everyone actually goes on YouTube and watches the video of somebody reading out an essay by G.K. Chesterton from Miscellany of Men, and it's called The Man Who Thinks Backwards. And in it, he will explain the whole problem with this thing called reverse induction. And basically, it's he uses an example of poker. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I highly, highly recommend it, because the major problem in today's world is that it's not just the solutions that are wrong, it's the problems are being misidentified. And it's one of the major causes of so much social grief and so much of this ideological madness, where the problems are, I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to go into the Black Lives Matter stuff. I'm not going to go into the whole trans rights stuff. It's far too complicated, far too difficult. And basically, it all revolves around, we're thinking backwards. We're not seeing the problem and working out the actual solution. We are seeing the problem and thinking, well, how is this caused? And getting it wrong and seeing what was actually wrong with it. We're not prioritizing. We don't think from first principles. What else have I been doing? Yeah, again, I've been reading Ludwig Ott's Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. Absolutely incredible, but it humiliates me. It humiliates anyone who wants. Yes, say Cardinal Mary de Val's Litany of Humility, but if you want to be humbled, read something like this, because it will just tell you that you don't know 1,000th of what you should know about your faith. And I'm talking about the basics. I'm not talking about all the theological speculation stuff. I'm not talking about your highbrow doctorate stuff. I'm talking about your ordinary common or garden stuff that children 50, 60 years ago with their penny catechism would have known. Because, do you know what? My morality lecturer and canon law lecturer in seminary was Father Robert Noonan. He was a Capuchin, and he was also a high canonical judge and member of the Theological Society, and he was actually the Vatican's representative when it came to the early 1980s divorce and abortion referendums and debates. And he was excellent. But he said, if you want to understand the faith, if you want to understand our creed, code, and cult, the only way you can do it is to be like a little child and actually see what's there. Because in our highbrow intellectualizing and everything else, we have actually lost our capacity to actually see what's there. You know, I could go into a big long arguments about this called heuristics, whereby we see patterns that aren't there while we actually miss what is actually there. But yeah, we need to be more childlike rather than childish. What else have I been reading? Oh, just ordinary common garden. Fun reading. It's actually The Ship of Theseus, also known as S. And it's written by, well, it's a sort of collaborative effect, but it's written by sort of J.J. Abrams and someone else. I mean, I can't find the name. DM Straka. Yeah. And it's actually a book within a book within a book, because as well as telling a story, it also contains, I don't know if you can see, let me show you, within that actually two people are communicating across the thing, it within the book by writing notes in the sidelines, in the gaps. And as well as that, you've also got, includes letters and newspaper cuttings and articles and postcards, and you're so enmeshed with the actual story that is just amazing, and it's just so fun. And you'll get little notes and train tickets and bus tickets and little messages left on napkins and everything else. If you ever want to give a gift to someone who is, you know, an extraordinary gift to someone, get this. It is absolutely, totally phenomenal. I really should be giving a talk by now, but anything else I want to discuss? Oh. What about me? What am I doing? Oh yeah, I'm applying to do my master's. as you might already know, I've just finished my law degree, and my third year ended up with a bit of a disaster because of COVID. And so my grades went down, down, down over this period. Since about Christmas, my grades went down. But I had reasonably good grades up till then. And so there is an algorithm whereby the university says if you apply this algorithm to your courses, you'll actually find out what final grade you got. And the irony is, if you apply the algorithm to each course individually and then add them up, I arrive at 69.99%, which is a 2-1. If you add up all my grades and then apply the algorithm, I get 70.01 as an average, which is a first. So I really don't know. I'm sort of, virtually everyone else in my course knows what final grade they've got, and I don't, because it all depends, and 100% is a grade average. So I'll find out in a few weeks, but at present I'm applying for my master's. Hopefully do it at Leicester. Leicester have been really nice about it, so I have to try and get funding, and I have to try and get reference letters. I need 2 reference letters from my university. They've been lovely about that. And also I've been trying to study a little bit more, because even though I didn't do jurisprudence as an actual course, I actually did somewhat jurisprudence in my first year when we did public law and constitutional law. We were given an assessment, and I basically did it in the jurisprudential way. And when it came to my dissertation, I veered down into the human rights, the ethical side of human rights, and the jurisprudential side of human rights. Because I don't know if you're aware, but previously the legal system was based on natural law, and then it became natural rights. But over the past sort of 150, 200 years, it's been infected with what's known as legal positivism, by which previously there used to be sort of the 4 Aristotelian causes, which used to belong to virtually everything you could analyze according to the 4 Aristotelian causes. And you would have a formal cause, that which a thing is, a material cause, that which is made up of, efficient cause, where it comes from and what it actually does, and the final cause, what it's there for, what is its final goal, its aim, its telos. And basically, as with most things these days, the formal and the final cause have been eliminated. And basically, the majority of academic subjects now is who's in it, what it's made of, and what it does, and where it comes from. And that's what happened with the law. So basically, we have a legal system which basically considers the legal system is the lawyers and the legislators and the judges, the whole judicature, and basically that's the law. Yeah, there is an overriding rule of law, but that rule of law is basically how the legal system should behave, how it should apply itself. Yeah, it's the whole notion of the law being moral, and the whole practical reason and the morality being imposed as a form of ensuring that our rights and responsibilities and our contractual obligations and our liabilities and being imposed, being actuated by a sovereign legal system, that has vanished, and it's dangerous. And one thing that's really ironic is that it's also infected the whole jurisprudential notion of positive law, positivism, has infected canon law as well, in the fact that majority of canon lawyers now don't have a dogmatic basis, don't have a moral theology basis, and don't have don't have an actual theological sounding before they actually go into law, canon law. And what happens is they treat the law as if it's an entity in itself. And therefore you end up with problems. They become legalistic, pharisaical. Instead of what the law is there for, and what the law, in other words, what the law's actual form and its final cause, they dissipate. And it's basically what the law's made up of and what the law says, you know. And it's dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. Trying to think, is there anything else during the week that's really caught my eye? Vegano. Yeah. We've already promised that we would do a discussion on Vegano, but yeah, there's a lot of commentators who really appreciated what Archbishop Vegano was saying when he was telling the truth about the Pope and McCarrick and specific bishops and specific Vatican policies, the corruption, the financial corruption, and the corruption when it came to the cover-up of abuse cases. But now Archbishop Vigano's decided to actually say, well, the root cause of these problems is the fact that the roof caved in because bishops and priests and cardinals and the professional laity and professional clergy all decided that they could do whatever they damn well pleased. And one of the major causes of this was Vatican II and the desacralization of the church. We got rid of because we got rid of the symbolism, we got rid of the communities that actually lived according to that. We've experimented on our children with weird, wacky out catechesis and religious education that alienated them. It dumbed down the faith. It gave them milk and water nonsense. It was, instead of actually telling them the truth about the church and Jesus and God and the Trinity and Our Lady, making them feel as if they were part of an actual Catholic culture, they just gave them the Good Samaritan, and they had to act out prodigal son, and they spent 7-8 years drawing Zacchaeus up the tree and doing a few little parables and singing an awful lot of bad songs. So they didn't get the penny catechism. They weren't even taught how to pray. Sure, they were taught how to sing follow me, and bind us together in colours of day, one into the mind. But they abandoned, as soon as they got a chance, they abandoned the faith. But it's not true. We abandoned them. We have generations that have been totally, utterly abandoned. I've also spent a lot of time on Twitter, and yeah, you can all follow our Twitter feeds, as we've already said. Laurence is the crushed bones, Benedict's the great Stalin. I'm on the side of the angels. Incidentally, why am I called on the side of the angels? Why is the name of my thing on the side of the angels? Basically, it goes back to when I was, I did theology class, and my lecturer was a rampant atheist. He was one of the world experts on Luther, but he was also a rampant, and naturally, because he was an expert on Luther, he had to be an expert on Augustine. And he is in his lectures on Augustine. He argued that Augustine was a hypocrite because Augustine fought against the Pelagians and he also fought against the Donatists. And he did not believe, and he said one thing about grace to the Donatists, and he said one thing about grace to the Pelagians, and he couldn't reconcile them. And so he challenged anyone in the class to try to reconcile them, reconcile Augustine's anti-Pelagianism with his anti-Donatism. And so I gave it a go, and I actually got out as well as getting a whole lot of other sources, I also read from cover to cover Peter Brown's Augustine of Hippo, which is absolutely excellent. And I went through J.N.D. Kelly's, early church fathers and the early church and everything else, and Philip Hughes, and read all manner of different things. Overread to this course, completely overread and overread, as well as the course books that we were given and recommended and everything else. I went over the top. And so I wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, explaining, the whole notions of what happened, the entire history of the Donatists, the Circumcilians, the whole. I actually wrote about the politics of what had actually happened in Rome, and that Pelagius had actually, being either a Welsh or an English monk, gone over to Rome, and he'd become everybody's favorite because he'd actually brought a brand of Christianity, which is stand up for yourself. Actually, get off your backside and do it. Be a Christian. Actually, go out there, because your works are what's going to get you. Whereas previously, there had been almost a pietistic, fideistic thing of, oh, I'm paying for the poor, I'm attending the services, everything else. And Pelagius turned up and went, no. You've got to do, you've got to be strong. You've got to be a man. It was almost like a modern Jordan Peterson. Stand up for yourself, clean your room, tidy up, do this, get rid of all the things which are holding you back in this life. And so he became an imperial favorite. He became the popular one. The whole point was, when it came to the notion of grace and repentance, and basically Pelagius had got it wrong. It was all, no, you get salvation on your own back by your own efforts. And then into Rome comes this book by St. Augustine, the Confessions, whereby it's all, without God, I can do nothing. I've been useless. I've been pathetic. Here's my life story. I have sinned. I have done this. I've done that. Yeah, I am doing my best. I am trying to improve. I'm doing this. But without God, I am nothing. And this completely, totally screwed up. But I'm going off track. And basically, I handed in this essay, and it was 3 times longer than it was supposed to be. But at the end of it, he was just stunned. My lecturer was just stunned, and he basically would say, I never give A's. I never give A's. And he gave me an A. And I was totally bowled over, and he just went, yeah, you're really on the side of the angels, aren't you? And it stuck. So that's why I'm called on the side of the angels. Very weird. But yeah, as I'm saying, I've been looking on Twitter, and I've been quite angered by Father Robert Barron. Yeah, his Word on Fire has done so much for promoting the faith, bringing Catholics back into the faith. And I'm not going to criticize the man, but his Catholicism book was one of the only books I actually wanted my money back on. Almost like fraudulent misrepresentation. Yeah, I don't know. Trace Description Act, I suppose. I wanted my money back. Because the whole, join us, we're nice. Look at us. We've had holy people. We've had holy, nice people in our lives. In the history of the church, we've all had holy, 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 nice people. And we belong. And that's why you should come in and belong with us. And yeah, there's been a few things about, Father Robert Barron's universalism, his name dropping, saying, oh, St. Augustine says this, and von Balthasar says this, and such says this, and such. And it's almost like he's not read them. But, fair dues. And basically he was talking about, you know, the viciousness of the trads on Twitter attacking him and defaming him and this, that, and the other. I'm just going, well, hey, hang about. If you're going to say that it's not the job of the bishops and priests and the hierarchy to actually stand up and denounce sin and evil and promote the good, and say it's the job of the laity to defend our churches and defend our religious statues and all this kind of stuff, that it's not, you know, it's not our job. This is Vatican II has told us the job of the laity. And yeah, I won't deny, you know, Fulton Sheen says that, you know, don't trust the hierarchy when it comes to saving the church. The laity will save the church. But we're a hierarchical church. They run the church. And yeah, it was the laity when it came to Arianism, and we were down to 5 bishops. Well, yeah, 5 bishops. And the reason Arianism collapsed was basically that the ordinary common or garden Catholic didn't believe it. They believed that Jesus was God, God from God, light from light, true God from true God. And no philosophy, no preaching, no sophistry, no rhetoric, no misapplying bits of the Bible could ever convince them otherwise, that Jesus wasn't God, and he was God. God died on that cross. So, you know, yeah, the laity, crying out loud, we don't do enough. And I think laity is going to be my main issue tonight. But there was a response there, Father Barron, and it was another famous or infamous Catholic commentator online, and he just referred to, you know, he used a few sentence enhancers to describe Father Barron. Sorry, Bishop Barron now. And someone said, where's the Catholic gentleman nowadays? Where's the politeness of the Catholic gentleman? Those days seem to have gone. All we seem to do is resort to insults. And, you know, Father Larry Richards, I heartily recommend that everyone goes on YouTube and listens to Father Larry Richards' men's conferences, or even get his book, Be a Man, where basically he will describe what Catholic masculinity and Catholic manhood and being a Catholic husband and a Catholic parent is all about. Because, yeah, we have been feminized. Yeah, we have been so emasculated. And I've said previously that the amount of men that have lapsed and just abandoned the church is epidemic. We're hemorrhaging it. And I think there's a major problem with male identity. And Taylor Marshall has done a bit on, you know, Catholic masculinity. But his was all backwoodsman, get a carving knife, get a hunting knife, get a Swiss Army knife, get this, that, and the other. Be a man. Instead of putting ice in your whiskey, use some rocks instead. You know, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. In other words, costing not less than everything. Very different, isn't it? Yeah. Just before I go on to what I was going to say, Vigano, have you noticed that so many commentators have actually said they supported Vigano when he was talking about the corruption and talking about the abuser cover-up, the Pope letting McCarrick off the hook even though he'd been told what it was like. But the moment the Garneau talks about Vatican II being the problem, and the problem of the desacralization, and the problem that we have abandoned so much of our faith and our culture, then all of a sudden, whoa, he's gone off the rails. He's gone off the rails. What is it that he's saying that they just don't like? It's like I remember I was with a famous Catholic editor one night in the pub, and the moment I mentioned that a specific archbishop was a Satanist, because it'd been proven that he'd been a Satanist, they'd done specific rituals, and it was actually, there'd been recorded accounts, there'd been actual police records and everything else. Oh, the moment you mention anything to do with that side of the occult, or anything to do with demons or spirituality or anything, going off the rails, going off the rails. And there does seem to be almost like a professional aversion to the spiritual. And yet they'll talk about the Mass, they'll talk about liturgical music, they'll talk about Catholic and Vatican politics until the cows come home. But they don't like this whole thing. They don't like the devil. They don't like the whole notion of demons. They don't like the whole thing of possession, demonic infestation. They don't like anything remotely like that. And they don't like things like, the pietistic forms of spiritual protection, holy water, holy salt, Benedict medals. They don't like that. That's too pietistic. That's too oldie-fashioned. And there's something dangerous in that. It's almost like a secularization, an institutionalized blinkering. I don't know. Yeah, but no, back to Taylor Marshall's manliness. And, his get a punch bag. Timmy Gordon, he was also, yeah, go on, go, do your punch bag, do your squats, do your this, that, and get a six pack for Jesus. Fight the damn commies. Please. Masculinity is about sacrifice. I'm sorry, it is about going the extra mile all the time. And yeah, as I said, Larry Richards, watch Larry Richards. Also, Father Chad Ripperger has a lot of things to say about masculinity and a feminized church. But yeah, so I was thinking about what to talk about tonight, and I was thinking, should I talk about the Ten Commandments? Because I actually really studied the Ten Commandments when I was at seminary, and the all underlying virtues that it corresponds to. And then I realized Father Chad Ripperger has produced videos which say things 1,000 times better than I ever could. Then I was thinking, we'll do the virtues. And the same thing again. If I do the virtues and the Beatitudes, again, Father Chad Ripperger and Peter Kreeft. Peter Kreeft's after virtue. His book on virtue. I'll leave it in the comments anyway. I'll leave a reference in the comments. But his book on virtue is phenomenal. And it's basically the analysis between the 7 deadly sins and the corresponding Beatitudes. I know there's 8 Beatitudes, but the corresponding Beatitudes are linked to the deadly sins and how they're antitheses and remedies for them. Because this is one thing that we're forgetting. We're so enmeshed in modern sins of prejudice, racism, misogyny, homophobia, not being nice, and world poverty and the environment and everything else, that we're actually blinkering ourselves from actual sin and actual virtue. And so I thought, well, maybe I can talk about that. And then realized that yet again, someone's got there before me. And so, seriously, there's one thing two things you should do every day. For a start meditating. Well, not three things. Start meditating. 15 minutes. Start with 15 minutes. If you're not meditating, you're not going to get anywhere. Not in your personal life, not in your communal life, not in your intellectual life, not definitely not in your spiritual life. You've got to start talking to God. You've got to. Secondly, I recommend read something by Chesterton every day. It'll change your life. Yeah, read your spiritual books. You read everything else, but seriously, Chesterton's all online. De Montfort University has published virtually everything Chesterton ever produced. And you can just go online, click a button, and read an essay. And his essay could be on absolutely anything. But if you want to learn how to think, and if you want to learn how to have mind-opening paths and nice truisms and nice paradoxes and great analogies, you'll find them in Chesterton. And what was the third thing? I can't, do you know what? This is terrible. I can't remember. I honestly can't remember what the third thing I was going to do every day. Yeah, sorry. This is ridiculous. Watch Census Fidelium. Watch Census Fidelium. I cannot recommend it more highly. There are some good Catholic websites, YouTube sites out there, and I highly, highly, highly recommend. I recommend Return to Tradition. If you want to know what's going on in the world and you want to hear actual informed papal teaching or informed insight from the past about the problems of today, go to Return to Tradition. Anthony Stein really works hard. Anthony Stein, really devoted academic who's using his talents to express what's going on. Might frighten a few people, bit of the end time stuff, but we need to know this. We need to be ready. Are we in the end times? I don't think we are. I think we're in a time of absolute terror. But I think it's going to get a lot worse. I think persecution is going to intensify significantly. And as I said previously, I think evil is going to be turned into good. I think it's all going to be flipped. We're going to live in a topsy-turvy world. We already see where, morality, things like abortion and euthanasia are seen as good. It's pure evil. Yeah. So basically, to finish off, I don't even know how far I've got. I don't know how long I've got left, but because I haven't really been timing myself. But yeah. When it comes to the whole notion of the Catholic gentleman, I thought it would be better if I actually read out something I wrote, I think it's about 6 years ago. Because the majority of Catholic gentlemen now, majority of Catholic men, have lapsed. They've abandoned the faith. But they're all too willing to, especially if they're professionals, they're all too willing to comment about it. And Andy Burnham, who was a Catholic, well, a lapsed Catholic, member of the cabinet under Tony Blair and in the shadow cabinet subsequently. And then he became mayor of Manchester, I think. He said something about Um, yeah, he said something about the church, and instantly everyone jumped on it. And so here's my response to what Andy Burnham actually said. Okay. It's all actually written on my blog. I think it's the first blog, the last blog post I actually wrote. But here's me in the meantime. New evangelists recently took to heart the lapsed Catholic MPs' sub-progressive complaints about the church not moving with the times and not being relevant to the youth and not engaging with the culture on their level. And amidst hand-wringing and posturing, they sought to formulate a proactive response to Mr. Burnham's claims, in just the same way that every form of new evangelization has responded in the past 30 years. And yet we're still wondering why 95% of our teenagers are hemorrhaging out of the church. They just don't get that Andy's generic and somewhat patronizingly shallow complaints about the church aren't the problem. Go into any large English town and you could find 1,000 Andy Burnhams, 1,000 ex-Catholic men. Go to a large northern city and you could easily find 10,000 ex-Catholic men. Go to Merseyside, you can see 100,000 lapsed Catholic men. People who were brought up in the faith and have abandoned it. Disaffected, fatally inclined, they're culturally Catholic, lapsed, who have just left the whole thing behind. Yes, they'll send their kids to Catholic schools. Sure, they'll turn up for Christmas for the kids. And they'll go to the First Holy Communion. And they will still go to baptisms, weddings, funerals, the matching, hatching, dispatching. Never knowing exactly what to do, but going through the motion. Should I stand? Should I kneel? When do I bow? And they have a pseudo-schizophrenic nostalgia for it all. But they retain their grown-up, worldly dismissal of it all. They don't exactly disbelieve in God because, well, atheism's too big a step. But they don't know exactly what to believe anymore. They think all this ritual nonsense is made up anachronistic hokum. It's medieval nonsense, Victorian nonsense, just to keep the people paying, praying, and obeying. And even despite the holier-than-thou mob, the whole money-grabbing old canons, the sadistic nuns from the schools with their big rulers, the hypocrites in the front row, like the town council councillor who's having it away with their secretary, or such and such who's cheating on such and such, or, you know, despite the religiosity problems, like the over-pietistic aunt who was a little bit mentally ill and she had visions of Saint Philomena, constantly saying a rosary during dinner and things like that. Despite all the madness of Catholicism, these lapsed, likely lads consider some of the spirituality, some of the devotions have some psychological benefit. No, doesn't do the kids any harm, didn't do their mother any harm. And they also opine that the fundamentals of Christianity aren't a bad thing as a moral basis. You know, Jesus was a decent enough moral teacher. You know, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. You know, it's a good social background. And it could be a good, sensible, disciplinary, ethical grounding for kids, providing you veer more towards the Santa Claus God rather than the bogeyman God. But why did these men leave it all behind? Well, most don't really know. They just did. It went from not making their normal ritualized autonomic effort to actually go to mass, normally to keep the mother happy or just because their mates went. It went from that towards making excuses for missing mass one Sunday, and then it just became, well, the world didn't end, did it? The roof didn't cave in. it hasn't made me any worse a person by not going, has it? No offense to those who have to go to mass, but well, and so gradually they drifted away because there didn't seem to be much point to it anyway. I've raised that on previous other days, that previous other videos, that Catholic education was so dumbed down that there wasn't any point actually believing it. But of course, these men, these Catholic men, these lapsed Catholic men, won't really talk about this to anyone other than their intimates. Rather, it will be, oh, the world's moved on and it's left the church behind. And if the world has left the church behind, if it seems to be a post-Christian world, it gives them some sort of quasi-justification. The whole rush towards secularization seems to vindicate their position that, oh, the church is for old women and kids. But then they'll argue the church has to move with the times. Of course there should be, and we've all got used to the list of the complaints that these people will provide about the church. That there should be women priests, that there should be married priests, that there should be gay priests. The church needs to relax its teaching on contraception and divorce, and it needs to compromise with the extreme cases when it comes to abortion and euthanasia in certain circumstances. And all this celibacy malarkey with all the ritualized vestments and the, no sex, no partner, and living on your own isn't human. We're sexual beings, therefore to have a celibate in the modern world, well, no wonder they go weird. The priests need to be hip, they need to be down and with it and trendy, and they need to be out with the homeless, the drug addicts, the dispossessed. They need to be more social worky and more youth oriented. And they should be like a part wandering monk, a part social worker, spending 24/7 at the food banks, the soup kitchens, and giving counselling sessions as if they're trained psychologists. And they should change the mass. Masses should have more hip and trendy music and bands. They should be more welcoming for the kids and the youth. And they should be more entertaining and not so boring. And we need to talk about things that young kids and ordinary people are interested in. Things like relevant subjects like the environment and people's personal needs and racism and, the workplace and misogyny and etc., etc., etc. You get the point. And we all recognize it, and we've all heard it. We've all had brothers-in-law or uncles and lapsed male members of the family who all give us the big lectures about what's wrong with the church and how, if they were in charge, if they were Pope, they would do this and do that and do the other and do everything else, and everything would be fine. And when it came to Pope Benedict, that Pope Benedict, he hasn't got a clue. He symbolized everything that was wrong with the church. And then what they do is they don't actually criticize Pope Benedict. They criticize a straw man that they create, Pope Benedict. All manner of latent pent-up animosities at the clerics and the nuns and the guilt trips that they had and the grief that they had by being Catholic. And they blame it on bigotry and intolerance and cruelty and heartlessness. And they concentrate on the callousness of Catholic moral teaching, rigor, this, that, and the other, as if the church could ever be accused of actually lecturing anyone these days on anything, apart from modern social sins, of course. And it was very easy to attack Pope Benedict. He was old and white-haired, and he was German, and he was very much from the old school. Yeah, that Benedict, he was behind the times. He was a nice enough guy, I suppose. You know, when he came over here, you know, everyone got to like him with the visit. Everyone thought he was going to be a disaster, but no, it turned out all right. But as a pope, well, he's wrong about everything, and he's past it, and the world's moved on, and there's no point of trying to reverse anything, or you just alienate people. As for Pope Francis, he's a bit of a good thing. He understands the world more, and he understands the struggles of real people, and he's going to liberalize things, and he's going to change it. He'll know. He's seen dictatorships in Argentina, and he's seen the slums, and he knows about poverty, and he knows about real people's real problems. And what will he do to change the church? Yet again, create the straw man, but this time the ones of the positive things, or your wish list, your bucket list of all your things you think that what the church should do. Yeah, relax on contraception, relax on divorce, relax on this, relax on that. Women priests, women deacons, marry priests, change, make it all love, and basically turn it into the song Imagine. Frankly, John Lennon's Imagine is one of the most evil songs ever written, but these sort of people think that Imagine is fantastic. You know, no conflict, no disagreement, no, everyone should just get on. Not the reason that we get on is because we disagree with things because they're too important not to disagree about. And then they'll use the excuse about Pope Francis. Of course, he won't be able to change things totally. There are too many rich, fat, autocratic bishops onto a good thing, or there's still corruption. It's, you know, old-fashioned dictatorial, and people don't want pushed off their thrones. But Pope Francis should be able to give the good push into the 21st century. So we won't be going back to the bad old days of sin and guilt and prejudice. He'll bring in reform if he can thwart the Vatican bigwigs. You can't expect miracles, can you? He'll give it a good start, and maybe the next person will make things better, and the next pope will make things even better. All from these adult men that have left the church. And why have they left the church? We all know why they've left. The church went through a midlife crisis. After Vatican II, the church went crazy, and it pursued a mad, self-indulgent binge and free-for-all for 50 plus years. They wrecked Catholic creed, code, cults, and its social, cultural, communal, spiritual, and psychological identity in the process. For nearly 2,000 years, there was always a point in being Catholic. It was a map for your life. It was a compass to direct you, a destination to achieve, and fellow travelers were all going in the same direction. And we all knew why, and we all knew why we were there, and why we were on that journey. And we were a community of totally divergent people, totally different people doing different things, having different lives, but we were all a community in the fact that we were Catholic, and our families were Catholic. And then suddenly, it wasn't there anymore. None of it mattered anymore. None of the rituals, the beliefs, the traditions, the devotions, the masses, the morality, the community, the whole calendar, the unchangeable, all the things that were solid and resolute and absolutely part of everyone's lives, they all changed overnight. And nobody had any idea what they could replace them with. Yeah, we had felt banners, we had wooden altars, we had chipped and mugged sacred vessels, we had folky hymns which sounded and terrible mass settings that were cacophonous. And we had sermons which were all about the priest and all about his day off, or all about what they saw on television last night, or how something they experienced in life was a little bit like the gospel, or just ordinary cautionary tales, or basically little fairy tale stories or little jokes in which they could sort of bring back God at the end into their sermons. But everything changed. No more kneeling to receive communion, no more altar rails, no more vestments that was special, no more incense, no more you had to go to confession on a Saturday in order to receive communion on a Sunday. And if it all changed, if everything that was true about the church could change, then none of it was actually true or real, was it? If the priests were all fine with it, if the bishops were all fine with it, and if the majority of the people seemed to be fine with it, then what changed meant that what was in the past wasn't true or real. And therefore it wasn't as important as we thought it was. And it couldn't have mattered as much as we thought it did. And as none of this mattered anymore, what's to say that the new stuff matters anymore? And so there's no point anymore. And so, especially with so many things compounded, like professional laity giving favored jobs within the church and prancing around the sanctuary, and majority of people going in, and it's a dialogue mass where basically you don't have any time to yourself, you don't have any time to think for yourself or pray for yourself. You just, priest says this, we respond back, priest says this, we respond back, and it's just quid pro quo constantly. What's the point to it all? And especially as they'd had bad catechesis already, and they didn't actually see any of the doctrines or the whole catechetical makeup or apologetic makeup to why this faith is any different from anyone else's, they left. And they weren't going to come back. Now, it's far too easy to apportion blame on the Andy Burnhams and, the lapsed neo-Catholics of this world for all their misguided misgivings and misimaginings and misunderstandings and misplaced allegiances and their misbegotten betrayals of what the church stands for. But Andy Burnham and lapsed Catholics as a whole, and millions of other lapsed Catholics with him, are more victims of what happened to the church over the past 50 years. They're not superficial, ungrateful traitors. They were people who were betrayed. They were abandoned. They were experimented on with new religious education programs that didn't actually teach the faith. And they were abused. We talk about we talk about clerical sexual abuse. Diabolical, despicable, abhorrent. But we don't talk about the abuse by the post-Vatican Church on ordinary Catholics and ordinary Catholic children by denying them their inheritance, their culture, their cultural identity, their communal identity, denying them the actual sacraments, denying them the truth behind it all, denying them purpose and meaning and a spiritual life. We emasculated the church. We destroyed communities. There was catechetical neglect. We had liturgical and educational experimentation. We enforced confusion onto people. One week it was this way, the next week it was another way. A new priest turned up and decided that he wanted to do the entire mass a different way. We dispossessed, we disenfranchised, and we alienated. And we used the excuse of Vatican II. Oh, Vatican II says we can now do this. Vatican II says we can now do that. Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to do. And it was an emotional spasm by the church. And it destroyed millions of ordinary Catholic people's religious identities. And somewhere along the road, they lost parts of themselves in the process. And may God forgive us for what we've done to them. Because they grew up, these little ones that were denied their faith, grew up, they're confused, and they're lost, and they're hurting. Recent new evangelization initiatives like Invite a Friend and Catholics Come Home, they haven't really caught on. And I suppose we have to at least attempt to ask ourselves why. More workload, I suppose. It's ironic that given the mass increased demands made upon a reduced clergy, having to go off to mission masses and do this, that, and the other, and attend committees here and everywhere, a reduced clergy has counterintuitively led to a reaction by clerics who are decidedly sedentary and, well, dare I say, bone idle. The missionary strategy of the clergy changed in the 1980s. Instead of the priest going out to the people, it was instead the priest should be available at the presbytery for his people. Instead of going out, visiting the parishes, knocking on doors, getting to know people, it was, no, my pastoral duty is to be available and here in the presbytery for people to come knocking with their problems. It was a disastrously futile idea. Totally absurd. And therefore it collapsed. When a significant amount of Catholics are forced to work Sundays to keep a roof over their head, the majority of priests now engage in half-day closing on a Sunday. I've argued it before. When the majority of masses across the country, on Sunday masses across the country, your last mass on the Sunday will be 11 a.m. So many people just cannot get to mass. And when I remember the presbyteries of the 80s and 90s and their workload, they were thriving hives of industry. It was like Crewe railway station, where people were in and out, and you know, a daily mass, yeah, would last 30 minutes, but the before and the after and all the parishioners involved, it could take up to 2 hours, and there'd always be someone that would come in and ask questions or want to know about things or get into a discussion about things and let you know what was going on in the community. And most priest houses were buzzing. They were thriving hives of work and interaction. People would be in and out, and then it changed. And presbyteries became like maximum security, solitary confinement strongholds. Priests used to be the big social characters involved around the entire community, their entire parish. They became Miss Havishams, twiddling their thumbs at home, watching Bargain Hunt with a cup of coffee and a hobnob for 6 days a week. Yeah, going to committees, yeah, saying their quick morning mass, but most of the time not being around for 6 days a week. Now, over the past generation, the majority lapsation has been among the working classes, of course. And even though during the 70s and 80s, so many trendy clerics were inveterate reverse snobs, where the middle classes and the upper classes were, oh no, we must be down and down with the poor. The poor are the ones we must concentrate upon. The underprivileged. And, you know, they said they were more targeted towards the working class because it was the social justice era. But now the only priests you'll find like that are the ones who are now bishops. They're aging youth leaders. And the problem is, these priests, even though they said they were for the working classes, they were actually decidedly middle class. And they found allies and associates and friends who would become their professional laity in the middle classes. And the middle classes, for all their virtues, are inclined to snobbery and judgmentalism and knowing better. And one of these things they know better about is knowing better than the Pope and knowing better than what the church teaches. And so most of your progressives and your liberals will be found among the middle classes. And the professional laity malarkey are decidedly bourgeois and they are cliquey. And so they like committees, where they could all listen to the sounds of their own voices. And of course it didn't work because it couldn't work. When this church stops directing itself towards God, it collapses into becoming people-oriented, friendships emerge while people are doing the same thing, working together, worshipping together, doing together, being together. But when people are just doing things, that's when personality clashes erupt. The petty power struggles, the silly one-upmanships, the tin pot tyrants, especially among the clerical branch. Partisanship, there's ganging up, there's taking sides. Now, go into a majority of parishes and you'll find maybe a Legion of Mary, working class. St. Vincent de Paul Society, working class. The Knights of Columba, working class. The Church Cleaners, working class. The gardeners, the ones running the raffles, the ones running the trips to Walsingham, to Lourdes and the Jumbulance, working class. But the catechists and the Sunday extraordinary ministers and the school governors and the Rotarians and the ones on the parish council and the liturgists and the ones who are ministers of this, that and the other, all fathers selected chummy groups from specific families, and they are invariably all middle class. Now, is it a mere natural orientation towards specific roles? Or is it what we've always known it was? That this lay empowerment is decidedly bourgeois, and our bourgeois clergy like it that way. They're middle class, they like being surrounded by middle class people. And if they come from working class backgrounds, they will be aspirational middle class. And they'll be snobby to boot. Now, Lacordaire said part of a priest's vocation was to be a member of every family, yet belonging to none. And priests don't really do this belonging to no families and being a member of every family. They don't do door-to-door visiting anymore, so they never really got to know the vast majority of their flock, except maybe during the big sacraments or during the awkwardness of bereavements and funerals. It's not good for a priest not to be occupied. And I know I'm not referring to the phony doing priests who are always rushing around from meetings and committees about every inanity going merely to compensate for the gaping void in their spiritual, personal, psychological, and pastoral lives. I'm not talking about the doing priest. Because they're phonies. They're filling in the gaps that their spiritual lives are supposed to fulfill in them. Now, loneliness is a killer. And when we have an increasing faithful, young and old, who live on their own, and need some form of support. It's ironic that their own priest is vulnerable to being a victim of a similar tragedy. So how can these priests reach out to new members or recall those who are lapsed? How can they do it if they're alone and they're almost lost in themselves, and they don't interact with their parishes, and they don't understand their communities, and they don't know their communities? A lot of it is a crisis in faith. Far too many of us do religion rather than be religious. And a lot of it is ignorance and fear and a deep worry that if we really looked ourselves in the mirror and reflected and discerned upon the little bit of religion that we do know, we might have creeping doubts about it all, and this whole belief in it all might just evaporate. The atheist might be right, the secularists might be right, the other religions might have some pseudo-truths, and Catholicism might have some pseudo-truths as well, but it could all be wrong. And so they worry that if they think about it, the little that they do have will actually vanish. Now, we're still not too bad at showing people what to do as Catholics, and we're sort of okay at telling them what they need to know, if we actually refer to decent catechetical resources, and how to do specific things. But we are woefully incompetent, especially in our literature and from the pulpit and in our newspapers or media commentators or virtually every source, and even from the Vatican, and ever explaining why we do all this. And when we are never quite sure about why we are doing any of this, the doubts linger and they fester and they intensify. How many times did our Lord ask, do you believe? I think instead of believing, there's just a lot of just doing it and not thinking about it too much. I think a lot of priests are just doing it and don't think about it too much. But guess what? If you truly don't believe something or are hesitant and uncertain, and if somebody asks you, oh, Father, what about the teaching of Our Lady? What about Fatima? What about the Immaculate Conception? What about the Assumption? What about Jesus and the Apostles? What about the Pope's teaching on this? What about that? And if you don't believe it, if you're hesitant or you're uncertain, or you fob them off, or you equivocate something away, or you don't know how to explain it, you're fooling nobody. Because people come to the church, people come to the faith, people come to Catholicism looking for answers to their whys. Do you want to hear a joke? Trying to think of a joke. Padre Pio. Padre Pio was praying in his chapel one day, and a peasant came running in and said, "Oh, Padre Pio, Padre Pio, please, 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 my son Pepe, he's his pet. I was loading the cart and the cart rolled backwards and it ran over Pepe's pet rabbit. I think the rabbit's dying, but Padre Pio, my son, Pepe, he is devastated. Could you please come and pray over the rabbit? So Padre Pio gets up, genuflects, leaves the church, goes with the farmer, goes back to the farm, sees the little kid crying his eyes out. And the little kid Pepe says, "Oh, Padre Pio, please pray for my rabbit. Please pray for my rabbit. I know you'll be able to do something for him. Please, you pray, you bring him back to life, just like Jesus. He come back from the dead. You can make my rabbit come back from the dead." So Padre Pio goes over to the rabbit, gives him a blessing, and he gets out a bottle and pours the bottle gently down the rabbit's throat. And he says another little prayer. And within 30 seconds, rabbit gets up, ears back, and starts bouncing around. Totally cured, totally happy. And the farmer goes, it's a miracle, Padre Pio. What did you give him? What did you give him? Was it holy water? And Padre Pio goes, no, hair restorer. Come on, it's a really old joke, but I thought, after what I've been talking about, we needed something to cheer us up. Please, if you have any opinions about any of this, if you have any questions you want to ask us, if there's anything that you really want us to discuss or anything that's really sort of annoying you about the way we discuss things, Benedict and Laurence will be back at the end of the week. Let us know. Please, say something in the commentary. Yeah, there are issues that we really do want to discuss, and certain things we're going to have to research, and there's certain things that we want to get into. But say a little prayer. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus, exules Filii Heaven, a te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, neac lacrimarum vale. Eiago advocata nostra, ilos tuos misericordes oculos, et nos converte. Et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende. O clemens, o pia, dulcis, Our Lady of Walsingham, pray for us. Our Lady of Fatima, pray for us. Our Lady of Lourdes, pray for us. In the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. So many things I'd like to talk about. Really want to talk about guardian angels because there is just so much that we seem to be missing about guardian angels. But again, Father Chad Rigager, watch his video on guardian angels. Peter Kreeft gives 2 videos on his book about angels and demons. You've got to watch those. There's just so many resources out there that I highly recommend. And basically, I am throwing it out to you. What do you want us to talk about? Do you want to send in questions? Do you want to, do you watch off the menu with Charles Coulomb and Vincent Franchini? They're fantastic. They can talk for 2 hours and it just flies by. Oh, that's another thing. Biersack and Coulomb. Go to Tumblr House on YouTube and the old Biersack and Coulomb talks from the late 90s. You've got to watch those. They are just so incredible. And Charles Coulomb, a lot funnier than there wasn't so many jokes about mackerel and the 13th floor and all that kind of stuff. He was funny. Bill Biersack really put him out of the show. Also, Bill Biersack, he wrote some really good detective books about a traditional priest and his traditional priest and his little sacristan, and his harridan of a housekeeper and everything else. They were fantastic, and yeah, they were way over the top. They were almost parodies of the sort of LA system, you know. There's a real parody of Cardinal Mahoney. It's really funny, but I really recommend those books. And, you know, should I be doing this on my own? It's embarrassing. I need Benedict and Laurence here to actually calm me down a little bit. So I don't exactly know. But no, seriously, what do you want us to talk about? Ask us questions. We don't want to get into politics. We don't want to constantly, we don't want to get into bickering or criticizing other contributors or other Catholic bloggers or vloggers or whatever they're called. We really don't. But, and we don't want to really get, I mean, yeah, we have to criticize the Pope about certain things, but we don't want to be a Pope bashing site. We really don't. You know, life's too short. We pray for the Pope daily. We just hope that, you know, the chaos. I mean, have you seen the recent thing, the whole new Vatican Constitution, which looks like the whole synodality thing is being accelerated? And I've already stated, I mean, in the first video, I actually stated that we know the big master plan is going to be polyschism, in which, I mean, you must know that bishops' conferences have no canonical standing whatsoever in the church. They have no ecclesiastical standing. Basically, they're a group of bishops. And basically, bishops have their own apostolic authority in their own diocese, full stop. They are authorities in themselves. This whole collective thing of bishops' conferences agreeing about this and agreeing about that, it's just the formalities. Yes, they're allowed to agree on, you know, what days should be fasts and what days we should have, you know, holy days of obligation and what days we should, yeah, the minor things. And yes, they can come out with joint statements about, you know, specific moral issues or political issues or this, that, but they are not a hierarchical branch within the church. And the whole point is Pope Francis has specifically said that he wants to turn them into synods in a national church, like a parliamentary democracy where you will have the bishops and you will have the professional priests and you will have the professional laity forming in like an Anglican structure, a democratic structure where they will vote on our creed, our code, our cult, and our discipline as national bodies. And thus they will fracture the entire church into polyschism, whereby the more progressive countries, well, the more progressive bourgeois professional laity will enforce more progressive aspects, more progressive and liberalizations of the church. And other countries like the African countries, the Southeast Asian countries won't. And the Poles won't. You know, the difference between Poland and Germany is going to be so diametric that they're going to be two completely different churches. Because that's the main objective, divide and rule in a Babel project. Have autocephalous national churches throughout the world so that the churches can never be reunited. And it won't be the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And we have to stop it. I don't know how we stop it. We pray for our next Pope to stop the beginnings of this, you know, polyschism plan. The synodality is a nightmare. And it will be a fracturing, and we won't be able to get hunted back together again for a long time. Trying to think what else. No, I'm going to throw out again. Please tell us what you want us to talk about. And please spread the word. Have I gone on for too long? Have you seen my ugly mug for too long? Is there anything else I want to say before I go? No, okay, so if people ever ask me for advice, um, and I don't know if any of you do the Myers-Briggs thing, but I know it is not like the Enneagram. Avoid the Enneagram, stay away from the Enneagram. The Enneagram is virtually veering towards the occult, but the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs, is actually just a way of actually compartmentalizing how you apprehend things, how you judge things, how you think about things, and how you rationalize things, and how you act towards other people. Therefore, it's not actually imposing anything on you, it's just basically assessing what sort of type you are. I'm an INFJ, which is called the counselor, and that's just basically could be, that could be my alter ego name, because people, even people at bus stops and things like that have a tendency to just ask me. I don't know why, but I just think I'm one of those people that just gets into conversations where I listen and I have a tendency to give advice. But if anyone's ever asked, if you're ever asked, I always give two bits of advice. First one comes from St. John Bosco, and he says, always make the first move. If you see there's something wrong, if you see there's a problem, if you think that there's something that needs to be said, say it, do it, because it could be your guardian angel is shoving you there. It could be Our Lady of Sorrow, Seat of Wisdom, actually putting it in front of your eyes and saying, look, you can help, do it, say it, because that saying and doing and acting can change lives, can actually stop something terrible from happening. You might have no idea, but if you see something and you want, and you should feel like you have to say something or do something, and it could be embarrassing or humiliating, or you might think it's not your place, make that first move. Just make it, just do it. Second one is from St. Francis de Sales. Now, I recommend that everybody should have a book on their bedstand, Introduction to the Devout Life, because yeah, there are great spiritual books, you know, um, St. Teresa of Avila's Interior Castle, St. John of the Cross is just beyond incredible. But St. Francis de Sales, for your ordinary communal garden hoi polloi like me, Introduction to the Devout Life is the way ahead, because it just basically tells you everything you need to know. It tells you off, it consoles you, it guides you, it helps you every step of the way into trying to be a better person, trying to become more holy and more clever, and actually try and do what God asks you to do. And the main argument by St. Francis de Sales is, it is never enough to love someone. That someone needs to know that they are loved. And that is our main job. Let someone know that they are loved. Yeah, it says, love your neighbor as yourself and love God, because as what charity really is we love our neighbor for the sake of our love of God, because everything that we love, the truth, the goodness, the beauty, the everything, it's God. Everything is directed towards God, and therefore our love of God is reflected in our love for our neighbor. But it's not enough just to love. They need to know that they're loved. And parents, let your children know that they're loved. Prove that they're loved. Yeah, you might love them until your heart breaks, but let them know it. Yeah, it sounds really childish, but I'm not blowing my own trumpet or anything else, but I would not be able to live with myself if I did not tell my children every day, you're loved. And yet it sounds really shallow and shallow. But, you know, I sort of go into a room and go, love my daughter, you know, love my boy, hug, you know, it's a bit embarrassing, you know, it's a bit cringy, but no, always tell them, always say, you know, if at my funeral, my kids can turn around and say there wasn't a day my father didn't tell me that the love didn't love me, you know, my father didn't tell me he loved me, um, that might get me into heaven. That might be scrape me into purgatory. Um, but let, you know, no, I mean, people talk about random acts of kindness, random acts of, yeah, sacrifice, service. Um, it's a man's job. A man's job is to sacrifice. Something he's done, just do it. Someone needs something done, just do it. If you're there and you're able to do something, just do it. Because just doing it, even if it's just listening to someone who wants to say something else, just let them know that they're worth it. Let them know that they're loved. Because if you let them know they're loved, even if they think, oh, I don't deserve it, I don't deserve it, that little bit of thinking that they are possibly lovable, even if they think, oh, the people are mistaken and, you know, I'm only faking it, but it's the greatest gift we can give someone, to let them know that they are loved, because we let them know that they're lovable. And if they see that they're lovable by us, then they will see that they are lovable by God. And this thing called love might actually be true. And if this thing called love is true, then things like goodness and beauty and truth are actually true. And if they're actually true, well, where did they come from? How can they be real? How can they not be transient or disappear? Or maybe this God thing is actually true. Maybe this God thing's actually real. And if maybe this God thing's real, then maybe this whole church thing might actually be true, might actually be real. It's never enough to love someone. That someone has to know that they're loved. And if there's one thing that I can get across, if I could get across to you, that as a rule of thumb in this life, I would say it's that. I have said more than enough, and I don't know if this is actually recording. I don't know if it's actually going to get through to anyone. I'm sorry if I've been moving my hands through my hair too much or put my fans on my face and I've embarrassed myself, because I've been really, really self-conscious and don't know what I've actually been doing. But you know, I'm not very good at this, am I? I thought, you know, you always think you're going to be so much better at this thing. But yeah, I better say goodbye, because, you know, good night. God bless. Please watch again. I doubt you'll have many of me on my own again in future. Yeah, I think you'll just be basically watching Benedict or, you know, Benedict and Laurence, because they sort of keep me in my place. And, you know, they're so much more holy than I am. And so much, they know so much more than I do about so many different things. You know, I'm bookie. I know bits from here, there, and everywhere. Most of the time over the past 3 years, I've been inundated with law books, as you can see in the background, you know, constitutional law, contract law, company law, tort law, European law, criminal law, criminal pre-litigation, civil pre-litigation, then criminal, you know, oh, good grief, the amount of stuff I've learned is scary. Who knows what I'm going to learn next year, eh? And will I use any of it? Well, I hope to go into teaching, so just have to wait and see. But please say a little prayer for me. Yeah, can you please say a little prayer for my family as well, because we've all come down with this bug. I don't know what it is. Not corona or anything, but we've not been well. And My family works so hard, just so lovely. So please say a little prayer for me and pray for me because I'm just a mess. But please, you know, spread the word about us. Um, say something in the commentary, in the comments box. Ask us questions. If you disagree with us about anything, say so. Um, if you have any recommendations or any resources, or you just want to ask us questions that we could possibly answer, please say so. Any topics you want us to discuss, just say so. Anyway, good night. God bless.